Absolutely. Well, obviously, I want to also move how this astrology, like, because you as a much more prominent tarot reader, tarot, I like you have to say
Hello.
tarot reading,
Mm-hmm.
but and obviously plug real quick, go to bluecloudbotanicals.com, get your 20% off. Sign up if you'd like a reading any given time,
Hi.
really, but just mention Knox Studios or Knox and
We'll have to make a special discount code for you, for anyone that comes through from the show.
I'd be happy to do that. And of course, you're always welcome back, Tara.
Oh, thank you.
You're a blessing and a scholar in your own right. But far as Taro, like, where did it start for you? How do you use it and experience it? Like, where's your where's your taproot? Like, what does it mean to you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the tarot has been in my life my whole life as well. So I mentioned, identifying as an herbalist, like that's been my career path for a long time, but I was raised in that as a way of life. In my home, we used plant medicine. My mother was someone who loved the tarot. She loved oracle cards. She loved that kind of like mystical, occult type stuff. And it would always be around, it'd always be in the home. And she'd get out her cards and do her thing, And I have a godmother who we call a witch as well. And she would come and bring new decks, and my mother and her would pull cards and ask us if we wanted our cards pulled. So being young kids, our mother and auntie would get these out and have us kind of just breathe and run our hands over the cards until we felt a draw to a certain card. And then we'd pick that card and we'd read the message.
Right.
So this was a big part of my upbringing, to the point that like I looked forward to this, or when I had questions of how to handle a certain situation, I would say, "Oh, let's ask the cards," right? And really there was no formal training in my younger years, and I don't think my mother has any either. But when it kept coming back to me, when other people would say, "I thought of you, here's this tarot deck," they would come to me, and I'd kind of be like, "Okay, let me set this aside." I joke with people and tell them I tried to rebel against my hippie parents. So I, took the course of going to do my pre-med. I wasn't going to be an herbalist. I was going to be a neurologist, and show them the science and da da da. And the same thing with the tarot. I'm like, oh, my crazy hippie parents, like, I'm not gonna play with those cards. And what's interesting is there were so many synchronicities, there were so many more than coincidence moments where the cards would appear in my life, in a way that was undeniably a message from beyond this physical world. I say spirit or source, that I was being told, I needed to pursue something with the cards. And I had a deck given to me very young, probably before 10 years old, called the Aquarian Tarot.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, oh, thought of you, Aquarius, here you go. That deck kind of followed me around. I'd move, as a teenager, it was in my dresser drawer or something, and I'd look at it every once in a while. And then I, moved out of the home, and it would just kind of be in a box somewhere, and then it would pop out every once in a while, and I'd look at these cards and I realized how interconnected the tarot is to astrology. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, this actually does kind of make sense, and the elements and our physical, mental, spiritual bodies. And I started to kind of see what the tarot was about, not still fully understanding where it came from, what its potential was to be used as a tool for actual guidance. And when I finally made this, I very clearly remember making the decision to learn tarot, to actually study, get to know the cards, know what they mean, what the energy is, the quality of each of these cards. And I pulled out that Aquarius tarot or Aquarian tarot, and I probably had half a dozen decks at this time. Right before I moved from Sonoma County to Mendocino County in California. And I couldn't find the little book that went with that deck, with the tarot deck. They all come with these little books that, have the definitions of the cards. And I was like, man, I don't know where that little book went, but I have the deck. So I moved to Mendocino County. Within a week of living in the new spot, I saw a yard sale in the neighborhood. I thought, oh, I'm going to go check out what they have. Lo and behold, sitting on the table by itself, randomly, away from everything else, was the tarot book that went with my specific deck. There was no deck, and all these decks are different, right? And so
Mhm.
there's the book saying, "Here I am, time to get to work." And so picking up that book from a yard sale in 2007 was really what started my journey into studying the tarot more. And because I've always had some intuitive gifts or premonitions, like my dreams would have symbolism or events that would, later unfold and make sense. The tarot became a very natural tool for me to use and to help others, receive messages from their own divine guidance. So it became second nature, and I love using it for clients now. I love being able to see, you know, how something may unfold. I really like to use it in a way that's like a yes or no. Hey, let's get clear. Is this the path? What does it look like? But what I've learned is that depending on the author of the deck and depending on the illustrator, and or both, the energy can be very different. And so it's important to me when I do get a new deck that I take the time to really sit with it and get to know it, because the same card could mean something totally different than somebody else's deck. And I hope someday I'll actually create my own deck. But I have quite a few that I work with now, depending on what the client's needs are. I have some pretty awesome decks to choose from.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great explanation. I mean, it's been a beautiful passion for me just this year, to kind of come into a greater understanding of the tarot. And well, first, like, get readings from you. Like, I've had readings from time to time. I used to do them on Earth Day annually.
Mm,
I kind of like set the stage, but now, like, as I've become more aware of like those moments, the full moons especially, like doing more prayer meditations, intentions, setting those in new moons, and then receiving the intention, from those moments. I think my understanding has grown quite a bit, and I've definitely put a whole bookshelf or a whole tier here dedicated to tarot now, where I have all my crystals. I have, my sage, the feather, and the uh, what's it called, selenite
nice.
stick, that I'll use. And I kind of have been working through different ways of structuring my readings. But for me, and like you're talking about getting to know a deck, I came across a Light Seers deck. It just kind of stood out to me, and I bought it. And it actually is like a ripoff, so it didn't come off from the actual Chris Sand with the book in the big, large format form.
Mm,
But I just started with that one and read my very first time. The very first card I read was the Fool, right?
mm-hmm.
And then I had a different reading. Like the second and third reading were identical.
Mm,
The 3 card reading. First card the same, second card the same. The only thing that was different was just the position of the center
right.
card. And I'm like, well, sounds like my past and my future are the same. The only thing that's really in 2 weeks out of a 78 card deck. I'm like, that's pretty standout. And so I just started journaling, not a message that made sense to me, but I just started a journal where I document which cards I was drawing, how many cards, and then like the position and how that worked. So over the course of this last year, and that was pretty much from May through December, that I have a working journal. And you're like you say, as a person, it's hard for me to be subjective in my own card reading sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or rather objective about like my subjective experience.
Right.
So it is more important in running tarot for the first time, or tarot, to like allow the cards and allow the world to kind of show me what they're showing me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a trip. It's a trip when, well, first of all, I gotta say the legend is, or the
there's a
supposed
legend.
way is that we're not supposed to buy our own decks.
I know, I know, I know.
Something I was taught, right? You are supposed
Hmm.
to be gifted a tarot deck, or supposedly you're supposed to steal it. These are the cards of the gypsies if you look back at the history of where the tarot came from. So we're not supposed to buy our own decks. Oracle cards are not the same as the tarot. The tarot is a very specific structure of symbolism and elemental, energies in there. So it's different than buying an angel deck or an oracle deck of some sort. But when you do buy a new deck, the other thing that I was taught or when you receive a new deck, because you're not supposed to buy it. The other thing is to sleep with it under your pillow
Yeah, I
and
did that.
introduce your subconscious to this deck and just kind of welcome it to imprint with your energy so that you guys can communicate more clearly and really think of that deck as a living being, as a spiritual being that's ready to communicate through the energies, the cosmic energies, the subconscious frequencies of your own vibration, like what's going on at that time. So if you're going to read for yourself, it is important to have that established relationship and treat it like a friend,
Mm-hmm.
asking it for advice, asking for guidance, and just kind of see what happens and trust. Like, the one thing I always laugh at myself when I second guess myself, when I'm like, oh, I don't know if that was right, doing a reading for myself. I don't have this problem with clients. It's so funny. But like you mentioned, for ourselves, it's harder to be objective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in my new home and there's a new sound. I was just observing, haven't heard that one yet. I think we have an ice maker speaking to me in the fridge. Okay.
Nice. That's all
Um,
good.
so that ability, took me a long time. I mean, it took me, probably years to really trust, like, if this is what the cards say, this is what the cards mean, right? You would reshuffle, oh, I want a different message. I don't know if that's right,
Yeah.
and try again. But that first message will always be the truth. It will always be what comes to fruition. And even if we try and ignore it or change it. So it's interesting how it
Yeah.
has kind of its own life. That's why I like to think of it as alive.
Yeah, a part of me is like, because like it's hard to trust a lot of different things in the world. So like the one thing I wanted to do with my tarot experience was just, it's that one thing when you rip a card, right? Trusting the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, the digital space right now can be so manipulated, and I'll lose track, go down rabbit holes, all this stuff. But something as simple as a tarot,
Mm-hmm.
I can't deny it. Like you're saying, like I want sometimes to not try pull a death card or like some of these like interesting things when I don't understand them for the first time. But like the devil card showing up in some interesting
Mm-hmm.
places, and I'm like, oh, what is this? How does this correlate? I get scared now. No.
That's what I was gonna say. People get scared. They see the
Mm-hmm.
death card or the devil card in the tarot, and they're like, "Ah, I'm scared. Somebody's gonna die, or something bad's gonna happen." And that's not it. When you really learn what the energy is behind the cards, and I will comment on both of those real quick for
Yeah.
anybody watching this. The death card, just like we were talking about with these cycles and the ends and new beginnings of Pluto and the age of Aquarius, and it's just that something's ending. It doesn't mean that somebody's gonna die. It's
Right.
not a Ouija board coming at you going, woo. The death card is like, okay, there is the end of, and depending on the placement, you've said that word a couple times. And, for people who don't know, that's the spread, right? Is what we're laying out, multiple cards. And then the placement, each one could have a meaning. I'm assuming you're doing kind of the three-card spread is normally a past, present, future, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the energy of the past? What am I currently dealing with? And what's coming up for me in the future? And so depending on the placement, you could have a death card as the first card and it's like, "Oh yeah, I just finished that job or I just, finished organizing that room, like something ended." And now the next card would be the present and so forth, or in the future like, "Oh, okay, I am going to be finishing college next year." So that could be what the death card represents, is that part of your life is done. It's closing. You're not going to do that anymore. The devil card, when I see that one, I remind people that it's like an alarm system,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's that saying, watch out or the devil's going to get you, or whatever, all these sayings about that energy, that Satan's trying to trap you or trick you, or I don't know, what's the one about idle hands is the devil's work. It's like
Right.
we always think of this as something to be aware of. Watch out, right? And so when I see the death card in the tarot, or excuse me, the devil card, I think of an alarm system. It's like, hey, pay attention. Something's going on that maybe you're not aware of. Maybe you need to balance better, right? I see it a lot when people are indulging in bad habits. Maybe there's something that you're struggling with, especially addiction, alcoholism, things like that. The
Right.
devil card will come up. There is that
Those
frequency,
temptations, right? Like there's a
temptations.
undercurrent of a
Hmm.
temptation on the horizon,
Yeah,
or in that
yeah.
in that
So
position.
It's not like, oh, the devil card's here, you're going to hell. Like that's not what that means.
Yeah. It's
So
over.
yeah, that's it. I'm done.
That's why I
Yeah,
like the Light Seers deck too, because it actually like doesn't just say death; it says rebirth, right? So
nice.
you're talking about like the end and the beginning. Same thing with the numerology of the minor arcana, where
Hmm.
the one and the 10. There's like
Hmm.
that Ace of Wands and then the 10 of Wands.
Yeah.
Well, like when you complete a cycle, it's like, well, that is now the same thing as the new beginning. It's just
Just
from a.
like the fool,
Mm-hmm.
there's an argument about whether that zero fool card is the beginning or the end of the tarot. It is what connects it, that point. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, I think I've definitely indulged quite a bit. I mean, I'm myself not even professional reader here, up to about 5 tarot decks, and
Nice.
I have 2 main stage oracle decks. One's more from like an earth energy, and then another one's more like the ethereal starlight frequencies, and they have like really nice readings. That one I like right now in the winter, where I'm kind of like it's a little more floaty. That earth energy when it comes to spring and summer will probably tap a little bit more into,
Mm.
but nonetheless, it depends on which one I'll use based on the astrology chart and which one's kind of feeling more,
Mm-hmm.
the utility. And that's like I get what you're saying with that relationship between what is oracle angel versus the
Right.
tarot.
Yeah.
So, and then that
Yeah. There's.
major arcana, if you can help me or and the viewers here,
Mhm.
the Fool all the way through the world.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And all the players, not just the Death and the Devil, but those ones that stand out, they seem a little bit superfluous, like the Tower and the
Mm.
Star, the Moon, like all the characters. What is it really trying to tell us in the story, as far as like the 1 through 10, and then you know, then you start a new cycle. There's like, I've understood it as a map, right?
Right.
So
So
what does
what's
that mean to you?
interesting, yeah, that's interesting because if you go back to some of the older translations of the Tarot, those maps are actually like the Tree of Life, the Kabbalah, or you can look at the physical plane, the emotional body, the psychological mental space. So, and subconscious dream space. So each section, it actually is kind of like going all the way through each of the physical, mental, spiritual, psychological energies of human. And and I think like there is a journey, there is a story, but it's different in many places throughout history. And so I really think it depends on the deck. I really think like even though the major arcana has a very specific like you mentioned, character, right? Like these are characters, they each have their own story in this greater story of life. But there's a way that depending on who created the deck, they have infused their own story. So it gets very subtle with how many decks are out there now. There is like the Rider Waite Tarot, one of the older ones. There's a few of them that very much stay in alignment with the traditional tarot symbolism, astrology, and all of that. But when you're getting into some of the more modern decks, it's important to kind of work more with the illustration to see what they were feeling and conveying, because that's where I think we receive more of the subtle messages in the major arcana. Like you can see the magician, and there's specific symbols that will be on that card on most decks, but there will be subtle differences that when you're using it to interpret what the magician means to you, you want to pay attention to where your eye is drawn first. What is the symbol on that specific card in that moment that jumps out to you? Because you may feel that in a different place than the physical body. It may be a mental reaction, it may be an emotional. So I don't want to say that it always follows the same story, right? That
Right.
each of those sections are the same throughout every deck.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
I think it's great. I've been seeing a lot. Well, what I was doing, and I'm kind of one leaning into, is using kind of the tarot as an introduction into some meditation to like set an
Mm.
intention. And I don't know what your opinion is like regarding all of your meditation. I know that you do have that as a practice of your own. So like I appreciate the background on the tarot and your experience, and I applaud you for like not, you know, it's not just for serving us. It's any tarot reader is, you know, it's about giving it away, right? Like
Hmm.
becoming that channel that can empower, you know,
Yeah.
see for another human being.